This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Justin Trudeau is on the ropes. Pierre Poilievre is taking the bait. And we've got one of Canada's best all-time political commentators here to take us into it all. Paul Wells coming up on a very special episode of Real Talk. Plus, we are just one day away from the third annual and the sold-out Real Talk Golf Classic coming up at the Ranch Golf and Country Club. Thank you to everybody who's registered. We're actually past sold out, John. So we're in big trouble with the golf course. We've packed it with too many golfers. There's going to be too many people at the steak dinner, and so our team is doing some damage control there. But the reason I bring this up right now is to let you know that we're going to have an early episode, an early edition of The Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. That's coming up on Thursday, June 20th. That's tomorrow's episode of Real Talk. Now, why am I mentioning it now? Because this episode of The Flamethrower is chock full of your takes on Canada sending that warship down to that harbor, that port in Havana, Cuba, at the same time that that Russian nuclear sub was down there. Some of you are pissed. Well, most of you are pissed, but some of you at me, some of you at the Liberal government, some of you at the world. And I'm going to lead off with that when we get to Paul Wells in just 30 seconds. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that this episode of Real Talk is happening with the presenting sponsorship of Alberta's top online real estate school. That's Relo, where better real estate training starts. If you're looking to get a career kicked off in real estate, whether it's residential or commercial, the absolute best move that you can make is to go to Relo.ca. That's Relo.ca. You can get licensed easily. You're going to save on costs with their economical course bundles. Plus, you're going to get support and business tips and a whole lot more. And when you use the promo code Ryan100, that's all one word, Ryan100 at Relo.ca, they're going to knock $100 off the Alberta residential real estate bundle. They'll knock another $100 off the Alberta commercial real estate bundle. That's the promo code Ryan100 at Relo.ca. Paul Wells is easily one of Canada's most respected and most well-read political commentators. You can subscribe to his Substack at paulwells.substack.com. We're proud to do so, and we're even more proud to welcome him to the program. Paul, it's nice to see your face again, man. Thanks for making time for us.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing all right. We're facing some fire from audience members who didn't like me poking fun at Canada's Navy vessel down in Havana. I called it a crab trawler. I suggested that maybe it didn't make sense for us to be down there. But some people are also suggesting that maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. How did that story land with you?
So it landed on a busy day. So I have not, I didn't hear what Minister Blair had to say in defense of it. I did talk to an old friend who follows defense things closely, and this person said, presence is deterrence, which I took to mean we can't know what a Russian boat is doing in Havana. We can't encourage the Russians to behave if we're not in the neighborhood too. And I'm actually inclined to that point of view. So I would never, Ryan, have sent you an angry email.
No, it's not your style.
I think that makes a bit of sense. Even Stephen Harper used to say, Canada has chosen a different kind of relationship with Cuba than the Americans have. Havana is a legitimate port of harbor for Canadian vessels, including Canadian naval vessels. And if there's a Russian boat in the next berth, I promise you the crew on that Canadian boat knew everything that was happening in around that Russian boat, probably gathered some useful intelligence, and then everyone went their own way, and that was the end of that. I mean, on the list of outrages, this one doesn't strike me as one of the big ones.
Yeah, I think that, for a lot of people, and we actually heard from Defense Minister Bill Blair's Director of Communications. Those are always the emails that get your attention when he's like, so I heard the episode, and here's a few things that, basically they were saying, yeah, it was a military mission. This was, requested by the Admiral of the Joint Forces Command, and we reference that. If people want to go back, they can check out our June 18th episode at length. We get into some of the feedback we received. Of course, I've got like a world of respect for Canada's veterans. We read a couple of emails, one from a Navy veteran who had sort of taken umbrage with what I had, my comments on the fleet and sort of how I was unimpressed. If we're going to send a warship down there, send a warship. But again, I acknowledge, man, I'm a talk show host. I'm not a Navy admiral. I'm not a military strategist. But, for me, it was always the fact that, the BBC had reported, as you know, a couple of months ago that hundreds of Cuban nationals had headed over to Ukraine fighting for Russia. Cuba has supported Russia in its war against Ukraine, and the optics of it seemed weird. But I think the reason why maybe so many conservatives are hopping on this, like even the pragmatic ones, like kind of the moderate ones. I saw Michael Chong the other day, the shadow minister for foreign affairs, commenting on this, suggesting that he thought it was, in my words, a fool's errand, is simply because the Trudeau government, and as you point out, the Harper government before, but the Trudeau government has obviously chosen a very different relationship with Cuba than the Americans have. I mean, Trudeau even more so. And anytime you start pinning decisions like this on Justin Trudeau, you're going to get at least half of the country suggesting it's an idiotic move.
Well, and one of the weird moments in Trudeau's time as prime minister was when Fidel Castro died. And the government's put out a communique over Trudeau's signature that essentially described Fidel Castro as a hero who was beloved by the Cuban people and was a great instrument of social progress and stuff like that. It was the sort of thing you could have imagined the Cuban government writing about Fidel Castro. And I know that people in the Trudeau government at the time were very uncomfortable with that communique, which came from Justin Trudeau and doesn't reflect Canadian policy, which is Canadian governments going back as long as Castro was in power have real concerns with obvious human rights violations by the Cuban regime. And Justin Trudeau forgot all of that because Fidel Castro was a pallbearer at his dad's funeral. And Justin Trudeau, incidentally, has often visited Havana before his political life on vacation. And so when a Canadian boat ends up in a Cuban harbor next to a Russian boat, I'm not at all surprised that it makes news. I'd have reported it too if I had been the first person to find out about it. But I just think that there's other considerations that we should keep in mind. The high seas and various international ports are places where you expect strange bedfellows. You expect ships from countries that don't necessarily get along to sail past each other and sometimes harbor near each other. It's like the time when a Canadian diplomat showed up at a Russian garden party soon after the invasion of Ukraine, and there was a huge uproar over that. That's a decision I would not have made. If I was running the Global Affairs Canada and I found out that a mid-level diplomat was heading off to a Russian garden party, I would have said, don't go to the Russian garden party. But to some extent, that's what diplomats are there to do. Diplomats are there to go to, frankly, unpleasant social situations so that Canada is represented and that Canada hears what's going on.
I think maybe part of the reason why we're so grateful for this story is it gives us a break from talking about the housing crisis and inflation. And as we know, the Alberta legislature wrapped its spring session and federal MPs and obviously decision makers, lawmakers are sort of heading to their summer breaks. The Calgary Stampede Pancake Breakfast circuit will soon be underway, and we'll see the hobnobbing and the handshaking there. It'll be interesting to see what this next couple of months looks like for the governing Liberals in particular. And congratulations, by the way, on your new book, Justin Trudeau on the Ropes. Governing in troubled times. Depending on who you talk to, Justin Trudeau and his inner team, his senior team of advisors, are either optimistic that they can turn the tide on polling and that, let's say a year out or a year and a half out from a federal election, that polling means nothing and that there's no way that that his political career is done. He sat here back in February in this studio and told us that although he did use ambiguous language, it's woken me up in my sleep and cold sweats several times since that I didn't press harder on his answer. He said he will definitely be a part. He intends to be there for the next federal election. He didn't say he'd be leading the federal Liberals, but what can I say? It looks like he's going to stick around, but a lot of pundits believe that if there is going to be a change in leadership, that this is now when it has to happen. Take us into what prompted your book, Justin Trudeau on the ropes. Obviously, it's not a scathing indictment of him, but you don't go easy on him by any means.
No, it's a critical book. But honestly, I expected if I got criticism for what's in the book, I thought it would be from people who thought I'm too easy on him. Because I do treat him as an intelligent person who's got a hard job. And there are people who would rather read about Justin Trudeau as a sort of a criminal mastermind. And I'm just not your guy.
But Paul, these days, if you don't call a politician an idiot or an asshole, you're going to hear from critics no matter what, right? Like we had Trudeau and Danielle Smith back-to-back months, and the feedback we got was identical from the critics, just different names.
Different party stripes. The pleasant surprise about this book is that it's selling well and the reviews are very good. So, I mean, if it's possible to find common ground in this crazy country on Justin Trudeau, I've found a patch of it, you know. And I just this morning got sent the audio files for the audiobook because we're coming out with an audiobook just as fast as we can to sort of catch up with demand. And the narrator of that audiobook is yours truly.
I was going to ask.
If you want me to read my book to you, I'm here for you.
So you're not hiring like Nathan Fillion or Ryan Reynolds or something like that?
No, I wish I maybe next time. Maybe for the next
Was
one.
that a budget decision maybe?
Oh yeah, because I come free.
Yeah,
So why did I write the book? Because my publisher, Ken White, with whom I've been working for most of my adult life, said it was time for a book that tried to explain Justin Trudeau, and I like a dare. So I decided to write one. It's a short book. It's an essay. I did very little fresh reporting for this. It's my interpretation of what I've seen over the last decade and a little bit, because it starts before he became prime minister. And it's an attempt to place him in historical context. So the subtitle's Governing in Troubled Times. And I take that seriously. I mean, anybody else would also have been prime minister during COVID, during the Trump presidency, during Brexit, and the rise of a belligerent China, and shooting war in Europe. And so part of what I was trying to do is to figure out, how does Trudeau respond as a major character in the history of the last decade, rather than as the only character in the book? How does he respond to these strange things that happen? That, I mean, like, say what you want about Justin Trudeau, he's not the reason Donald Trump became the president. He's not the reason China had a new belligerent stance towards the West in the last decade. So how does he respond to that? And I tried to answer some of that. And the answer is, I think we've underestimated his survival instinct. He is a fighter beyond what I think most Canadians would have credited him with, and he's beaten 3 consecutive Conservative leaders. And I think he underestimates his creativity, his insight into the modern time. He overestimates that stuff. So he's more of a fighter than we thought. He is less of a political philosopher and less of an innovative politician than he thinks. And that's the story I try and tell over 100 pages.
What do you think's going to happen with the Liberal Party over the next year or so? You think he leads them into the next election?
Golly, I hate making predictions about stuff that hasn't happened yet. Yeah. But in a field with a lot of uncertainty, I do think that he leads the party into the next election, and I think it goes very badly for them. But I wouldn't bet more than $10 on either of those. I bet a lot of money that goes badly for the Liberals in the next election. I would bet less money that he's the leader, but I think he wants to be the leader.
Yeah.
Even as recently as this week, he gave another interview to the CBC where he sure talks like somebody who's justifying another run, not trying to decide whether to run again.
I'm calling him up on my Instagram as quickly as I can here because I wanted to reference something that I thought was interesting. Like when he came on our show and he basically said if I wanted to be, my first question to him was basically like, the pollsters are predicting a bloodbath for your government next election. Your polling's in the toilet kind of idea. And he basically went on to say like, listen, if I wanted to be popular, I wouldn't have gone into politics. And he talked about the strain of the job and the drain of the job and this, that, and the other. And it was actually kind of a pretty, it was a remarkable bit of commentary on the show. People can check, that was our February 21st episode if people want to check it out. But regardless, on Father's Day, he posts on Instagram, he says, my dad was my hero and he still is. And then he talks, to his kids, to Xavier, Ella, Grace, and Hadrian. He says, no matter how exciting or fulfilling this job is, nothing beats being your dad. I love you. And I thought it was interesting to see him describe his job as exciting and fulfilling, because when he was here in February, it was quite the opposite commentary. Like he just sort of like, I don't know, his response was like he'd been punched in the gut a few times,
Yeah, I mean, I expect it's both. Any of my favorite jobs have been hard and satisfying, and the few jobs I've ever had where it just felt like I was punching a time clock, I didn't last very long in those workplaces. Incidentally, Pierre Poilievre also had a Father's Day message that I just found fascinating, talking about his dad and his relationship with him, and it was one of the more frank and human moments that I've seen from Poilievre recently. It's something about our dad's mind passed away about 5 years ago. Something about thinking about our dads brings out the real person in us. But I think Trudeau has a hard time imagining a Liberal Party without him now. I think he has a hard time imagining what on earth they would do without him. And it's funny, so he told you if he wanted to be popular, he would have stayed home. But when you think about the things that have made him unpopular, they're, for the most part, not governing decisions. Blackface, the terrible mess they made of the SNC-Lavalin affair, which they claim was to protect an engineering firm in Montreal that had a lot of employees. But in the end, they didn't even succeed in doing that. And they lost 2 of their cabinet ministers, and they've never recovered in the polls really from that moment. As recently as yet another tropical family vacation over the Christmas holidays. It's not Trudeau's governing decisions that make him unpopular. It's the sense that he doesn't live in the same world that the rest of us do. I think, and and what he's told another Trudeau biographer, Stephen Marr, is he's just going to take the hit. If he's going to be unpopular for a tropical vacation, he's just going to take the tropical vacation and we can decide what we think of it, which Canadians have.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting, right? Like I think back to this, what was it? I don't know if I used the word interrupted. Remember that there was a wedding, I think it was on Tofino, and he was surfing. And he like popped by and took photos with the bride and groom in his wetsuit. And it was like, sort of similar to that maybe Stockwell Day jet ski thing where some people were like, this guy is unserious. This guy's full of himself, this guy, whatever. But then on the other side, there's like the every person that looks at that and goes, aw, like, look at that. Like, isn't that cool? Like a world leader stops by and takes photos with a wedding party. And you kind of wonder if like in a scenario like that, if he's doing the math, on popularity and going, or maybe he's not even thinking about that and just goes, yeah, I think it's worth it.
On the Tofino thing, it was early enough in his time as prime minister, and it was far enough west that I bet that wedding party was just delighted. I bet they were over that. I bet they're still talking about the time. Although they've started to notice that when they tell that story, people roll their eyes when they mention Trudeau. But at the moment, I don't think people minded having a Justin Trudeau. I wish he would wear a shirt, but you do you, I guess.
Yeah, shout out to the show's producer, John Hicks, who came up with the shirtless six-pack Trudeau photo.
Yeah, I've got a bucket of folders of shirtless Trudeau here. I just keep on hand.
Yeah, very well done. Paul, you've been writing quite a bit about Pierre Poilievre as well. Again, paulwells.substack.com. Poilievre takes the dare. This is an interesting one because this is certainly, when you looked at the federal budget and, some of the sort of those things, I mean, obviously budgets are hundreds and hundreds of pages and there's so much information to sift through and many, many implications for a lot of people. But the Liberals increasing the capital gains tax was like one of the ones that, like, we talked to business groups, we'll talk to chambers of commerce, and obviously that was kind of one of the angles that they really latched onto. The government and Finance Minister Freeland has certainly said, listen, like, in a room of 1,000 people, this would impact like 4 of you. However, it has, I think, in public opinion, landed as the Liberals are cranking up another tax, and the Conservatives have taken a stranglehold on that. You're right about how the Liberals gave Pierre Poilievre 6 weeks advance notice, which you suggest may be a bit of a bonehead move on this file. But take us into that capital gains tax increase and the bigger term or the bigger picture implications of it as you see it.
So on the day of a federal budget, journalists get advanced look at the budget in return for being locked in, literally like stuck in a room with no way to communicate with the outside world until the finance minister gets up to talk. I was in that budget lockup, and a senior advisor to the prime minister, frankly, we don't have a lot of conversations, me and this person, but that person plunked themselves down next to me and said, I think we like this fight. I think Justin Trudeau fighting for ordinary Canadians against the fat cats is a fight that we like. And so I knew from that moment that they were really interested in the capital gains inclusion change. It's hard to have a short version of that. They saw that as a political thing and not just a budgeting thing. And they made it even clearer a week later when they said that they're going to force the House of Commons to vote separately on that measure, which wasn't necessary. It could have just been part of the budget, and the whole Commons could have voted up and down on the budget. Why did they like it? Because Poilievre had a choice. He's been complaining about capital gains taxes as a class of taxation for as long as he's been in politics. Since he was a teenager, he's been complaining about capital gains taxes. So he should vote against an increase in the capital gains tax. But he's also been trying to represent himself as a friend of the working Canadian. And most working Canadians don't have access to $250,000 of capital gains tax, capital gains in a year. So theoretically, he would have been torn in 2 directions on how to handle this. In the end, he's voted against this, and he's chasing the government over this. And his argument is, we can debate the details until the cows come home, but this government would not need to raise any taxes if it wasn't doing a lot of wasteful spending. And so the way to think of this is not, am I affected personally by the capital gains tax increase? The way to look at it is, why does this government always come looking for your money? And that is a bold, simple way to phrase it that I think is winning the day. I think, I've often been critical of Poilievre, but I think he's found a better frame for this fight than the Liberals had. And I think they're starting to regret the bright idea of coming after him on this issue.
Yeah, he's like, it's the whole affordability thing, right? I mean, we see certain elections painted as like, what's the ballot box question, basically. Yeah. And I think, obviously a lot can change in a year or more. But, you have to see the ballot box question as, and we see some of the attack ads or the political messaging out from the Conservatives right now. And it's basically under the Trudeau years, or under the Trudeau Prime Minister, the tenure, your life has become more expensive, right? Like, inflation's out of, and like, there's obviously a million contributing factors. And I hope that most people have like the half a brain required to like, sort out like, what's the federal government's fault or what's not. But at the same time, the facts are, unless you're a real estate investor, the housing bubble's not been good news for you. Groceries are way up. There's like boycott campaigns for certain. You're right. Like all the big stories, all the big themes on virtually everything come down to what things are costing people. Like really, not that climate change doesn't matter, because it does, but like you poll most people or you talk to most people, this is not an election on climate change. This is not an election on, international relations. It's an election on affordability. And the question will be, for the guy that became prime minister at a relatively young age, it'll be 10 years ago by the time that we start talking about a federal election. He won it, I think. Correct me if you disagree, but he won it like talking to the middle class, right? Like yes. That's basically who put him in office. And now it looks like those might be the people that kick him out of that same office.
That's one of the things that really stood out to me when I started doing the research for this book. I went back and I looked at what he said to me during the Maclean's debate in 2015, and what he said to the country. I was just sitting on the stage. What he said in his campaign literature, in other debates, and it was very much middle of the road economic discourse. He went so far as to criticize Stephen Harper for running 8 consecutive deficit budgets, which suggests that this was a guy who thought balanced budgets were pretty important. And he's never come close to governing as that person that he ran as. And I think that's been a long-term source of discouragement for Liberals who think the Liberal Party has historically often been the party of responsible government. And they think Trudeau has thrown that advantage away.
Hang tight for 60 seconds. When we come back, Paul has done some remarkable on-the-ground reporting on Alberta's opioid crisis. It's a 3-part series at paulwells.substack.com. We're going to get into that in just a second with one of my favorite political writers of all time, and I'm not just saying it because he's on the show right now. The show wouldn't be happening without the support of California Closets. And Johnny, the Edmonton Oilers are 1 for 1 in the Stanley Cup Final with you mentioning the California Closets Stuart Skinner commercial.
He looks incredible. He looks calm. He looks dialed in the commercial.
Doesn't he?
Just like in the game last
So let's
night.
just remind people that the Edmonton Oilers star goaltender Stuart Skinner chooses California Closets. So why wouldn't you? Whether it's garage storage systems, whether it's your dream walk-in closet, whether it's your mudroom, your boot room, your laundry room, whatever it is, California Closets does it all. They do it better than anyone else, and it all starts with a free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. We also want to give a shout out as we think of our fellow Canadians in the Northwest Territories looking at evacuation orders right now due to wildfire. 'Tis the season, and while we hope to see everybody dodge those bullets, if disaster strikes in your neck of the woods, don't forget to get in touch with Complete Care Restoration. Fire, flood, black mold, asbestos, you name it, they take care of it with their team of certified and trained technicians. Don't mess around with this stuff yourself. Get in touch with Complete Care Restoration at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. Paul, I'm in a political group chat, and this is where we get to be quite honest with you. There are some elected officials in there and a lot of campaign strategists in there, and a lot of them are big fans of your writing. And I'll tell you that every single one of the contributors to this group chat are in Alberta. And so when they saw that Paul Wells was going to be covering Alberta's opioid crisis firsthand, traveling out here, right? I mean, hitting the street and taking a look at it, you had everybody's full attention, and we've dug into it and we've read through it, and analyzed it ourselves. But I'm curious, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it and pick your brain on what it was about. I mean, we know that the opioid crisis is killing tens of thousands of Canadians. It's a horrific situation. It's a full-blown health emergency. But why Alberta? Why travel to Alberta to cover this?
Because a year and a half ago, he started to do some political messaging that amounted to, first, a video that he put out on his social channels, and then an op-ed that he wrote for the National Post that amounted to saying British Columbia is screwing up its handling of the opioid crisis with things like safe supply and decriminalization. And we should look at Alberta for a better model. And then it took a while, but we finally got the numbers in for the year 2023, which was the year that Poilievre kicked off by making this argument. And 2023 was the deadliest year ever for opioid deaths, overdose deaths in Alberta. So if Alberta is a better model, it's still not a great situation right now. So I wanted to make that point. But then I actually have some experience, as I think all of us do, dealing with people who have substance use issues and so on. I care what happens to people. And I thought, kind of, who gives a shit whether I win an argument with Pierre Poilievre? What's going on in Edmonton and the rest of Alberta? And so I came out for a week, and I talked to clinicians and the police and members of the Alberta government to try and understand why it's gotten so bad. So the first thing is, it's the deadliest year ever. Second thing is, worse in Edmonton than most of the rest of the province. And the third thing is, everyone is trying their best and doing the best work they can, including Danielle Smith's government. And I spent a day with Marshall Smith, her chief of staff, who's a recovering addict, and who is one of the people spearleading a whole of government effort to try and get more more Albertans into recovery rather than just living forever with their addiction. And I was home. I was back in Ottawa before I realized I couldn't tell all of this story in one story, and so I split it up into three parts. It runs more than 7,000 words, and I give just about everyone some excuse to be angry at me because I tell a complex story, and I let a lot of the participants in this debate tell their part, from the Edmonton Police to the Alberta government to some clinicians who think the Alberta government's doing everything wrong, to some other clinicians who think the Alberta government's got some interesting ideas, but it's still just going to be a hell of a hard fight. And we have to expect that a lot of people living with substance use disorder are not going to get better because their lives have been so hard already.
So you look at, I mean, some interesting storylines. Obviously, I'm sort of selectively picking and choosing here, but BC requests this Health Canada exemption, a pilot project to decriminalize possession of small amounts of drugs. I don't know if you want to say it blows up in their face, but David Eby basically they walk it back like a year later. At that time, then you've got the city of Toronto that sort of had those wheels in motions, and there's obviously implications there. Vancouver says this was a disaster, my words, not Vancouver words. Then what does that mean for Toronto? You've got Alberta kind of defunding or underfunding things like supervised consumption services, which harm reduction advocates say is horrific, but at the same time, Alberta dumping a ton of cash into things like detox and recovery programs. Like you stated, and I want to state it on the record as well, Marshall Smith, whether you appreciate what he's doing or whether you don't, you can't question his commitment to this. I think that and I don't know him very well personally, but I would say that he sees this as like his life's work, and it means a great deal to him. So it's a priority for this government. I know that for a fact. But, I'll talk to harm reduction experts and they'll say the Alberta government's going about this all wrong. I think personally that it's stupid and naive to suggest that you don't need things like detox and recovery programs. You obviously do. But I also think you need things like the frontline services for supervised consumption. Do you see, based on everybody you talk to, I know that, first responders are being taxed. Talk to personal friends that are firefighters as an example. One of them told me that they responded to 14 drug poisonings in one shift, 14 different times. The trucks left the fire hall to go reverse an overdose 14 times in one shift. That's just unsustainable. It's and just the strain on the system, the death toll. These are real life human beings that are perishing. It's an absolute disaster. When you've taken a look at the landscape, are you convinced there is a right way to approach this? Are you convinced that this is something that can be meaningfully and successfully addressed?
We can try and give everybody as much dignity and as much safety as we can, and there's going to be different ways of going about that. And one of the people I talked to is a doctor named Monty Ghosh, who ended up being kind of my tour guide through this policy landscape that I don't know well because I'm not in Alberta most of the time. And he got a sense that I was going to be contrasting British Columbia to Alberta or comparing British Columbia and Alberta. And he said, look, I'll tell you something. I don't know if you want to hear it. I think it's just going to be bad all over. And I think as we get into this sort of festival of finger pointing and blaming and telling each other that we're doing it wrong, I think we're a little too quick to forget that. I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is fentanyl, a vastly more dangerous, addictive, and toxic drug than heroin and cocaine ever were. And it's going to cause horrible problems wherever it goes. So there's a lot of debate over the Portuguese model of opioid policy, which is to legalize personal supply of opioids for personal use. It was presented as a model for what happened in British Columbia. Portugal's got almost no fentanyl in it. It's just where the markets are, where the supply goes. the Portuguese model is a really good model if you've got 1980s drugs, if you're mostly dealing with heroin and cocaine. And the Portuguese model is harder to adapt to a situation where there's a flood of fentanyl coming in often from the coast. So it's going to hit British Columbia harder, but it's going to hit Alberta hard too. And these were some of the things that I wanted to sort of walk through rather than just sort of doing what journalists often do, which is to write stuff off with a line or a slogan or a paragraph of kind of shallow. I decided to give the story all of the complexity that it deserves, and people can decide. I'm happy that a lot of people are reading this series, and they can decide how well I did.
Well, you did a phenomenal job. That's the answer, and we sure appreciate it. It's like you said. I mean, this is something that impacts everybody, whether they realize it or not. Everybody knows somebody that's struggling with an opioid addiction. I guarantee it. Some people think, well, I don't know anybody that's struggling and living on the street. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about C-suite executives that are waiting for a hip surgery that have been prescribed high-powered opioids and are developing issues. I mean, it's hitting every single corner of our society. And I've often sort of lamented the tragedy that we have to see like white people in the suburbs dying from something before a lot of people care about it. But oftentimes I think we need to remind people that this isn't an issue impacting like just the homeless population or impacting just certain segments of our society. It's far reaching. The numbers prove it. And it's something that demands our full attention. People can subscribe to your work at paulwells.substack.com. Real Talk is proud to subscribe, and we encourage our audience members to do so as well. Before we go, Paul, real quick, the last time that you and I had a chance to hang out, and it was actually as a political geek and a nerd, this was one of the most fun weekends of my life. It was like you, Andrew Coyne, like Christy Clark. You remember this. It was at that time called Center Ice Conservatives, and it was like a summit kind of in the city of Edmonton. I would say, I don't know, what were there, 400 or 500 people in the room, something like that, exploring at that time whether or not there was room or space on the political spectrum to support what you'd probably describe as progressive conservatives, but kind of middle of the road folks. They evolved their branding from Center Ice Conservatives to Center Ice Canadians. And then fast forward to just a short time ago, on April 12th on Real Talk, we welcomed their interim leader, Dominic Cardy, one of the party's co-founders, Rick Peterson, and one of their party supporters as well, to the studio as they rolled out the Canada Future, or the Canadian Future Party. The episode did all right. People were intrigued, but to be honest, I've seen like zero momentum, zero presence for the party. I don't like to be a cynic, and I really don't like to shit on people's political aspirations or political involvement. But I heard your take on it at that summit a couple of years ago. I'm curious to where you're at now. Do you think there's any room on the political spectrum for another party cut from this cloth?
So I was getting emails from this new party, as I get a lot of stuff sent to me from a lot of organizations. And I would check it out, and it was so boring that I finally unsubscribed, which is probably not a good sign. There is room for fresh new ideas and energetic new political tactics. I've wondered for a long time why the Green Party doesn't get taken over by a new generation of really superb political talent and tried to turn into something that matches the environmental concerns of a lot of Canadians instead of being essentially the Elizabeth May fan club. This party isn't that. And I think you could make a strong case that most of the new energy and the new talent in Canadian politics in the last decade gathered around Justin Trudeau a decade ago, and then gathered around Pierre Poilievre 2 years ago. And I think there's been more room for innovation and fresh thinking in our traditional political parties in the last decade than there has been among the people who sort of throw up their hands and say, boy, you sure can't vote for either of the alternatives. I think the message going forward is that people should participate in their political parties, try to advance their ideas within the traditional political parties. And when an opposition arises during a change in leadership, you should participate in the debate then. I think that works better.
I have never been bored by one of your emails, Paul. So congratulations on that. Real Talkers, it's like $50 for the entire year to subscribe at paulwells.substack.com. Encourage you to do so today. It's always a pleasure to connect with you, man. You make us sharper. You make us better informed. And for that, we appreciate you. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you got it. That's one of Canada's all-time great political commentators, Paul Wells.
Not boring at all.
Not boring at all. Not boring at all. Yeah, interesting takes. I encourage people to check out his coverage of the Alberta opioid crisis. It's really remarkable stuff. And then again, interesting takes on Pierre Poilievre, on Justin Trudeau on the ropes, and more. If you want to sound smart in front of your friends, that's where you got to go.
That's what we try to help you with here.
That's what we're going to help you with here. We've got some talking to do about the party last night, which is great. I want to get into some of the responses we have from talkers down in Calgary. We put the call out. We were talking about the water crisis down in Calgary, and we're getting very conflicting reports. Real Talkers are all fired up this week. I'm getting people in all caps, yelling at us on social media and in emails about our conversations on the Calgary water crisis. But firsthand anecdotes. I mean, people are reporting in saying, here's what I am seeing from my next door neighbor. So we're going to get into that. They're just the Calgary Stampede is approaching, man. Like people are starting to dust off their boots right now in Calgary. So this is a real thing. But before we go there, every Wednesday, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to head out to the mountains, so to speak. And this is a very special edition one. You remember that favorite line from the stage in Back to the Future at the Under the Sea dance? This one's for all you lovers out there. Yeah, that's right. If you're getting married soon, but you have your heart set on a unique elopement, if you're looking to elope, there's a new business in Jasper, Alberta that can help you with all of that. And I absolutely love this. This is Jasper Park Elopements. How brilliant are these business owners? I absolutely love this. Jasper Park Elopements is a partnership between a local wedding photographer and a wedding commissioner and includes everything you'd want from a dream elopement with none of the hassle, because that's the whole point of eloping. Plus, to celebrate World Pride Month, they're running a giveaway contest until the end of June. So you can check out the business. This is authentic elopements for laid-back lovers. I love this. At Jasper Park Elopements, .ca, but the giveaway package is valued at nearly $7,000, and it includes planning, photography. They'll have the officiant on site for you. They're going to provide the florals, hair, makeup, grooming. They're going to make sure they've got cold bubbly on site for you there, plus a cake made by the lovely Lynn's Place Catering. And entering is simple. All you've got to do is follow Jasper Park Elopements on Instagram and then like the post that we're showing you on the screen right now. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, it's the post that opens with good news, lovers, and they're talking about World Pride Month, okay? You tag three friends in the comments, you share the post, and then you click the link in their bio to tell you why you want to elope in Jasper with them for free. They're going to announce the winner on Instagram and via email on the 2nd of July. And again, just a reminder, you can check out all of their elopement packages online at jasperparkelopements.ca. MyJasper Memories is presented by Tourism Jasper, Wednesdays, right here exclusively on Real Talk.
Oh, I almost fell asleep during that after the party last night.
Johnny, did you just
so
really,
soothing.
after a sponsored segment?
No, I don't mean that. I just
this
mean
is going to be cut from the
was,
podcast. Fucking guy.
It was amazing, but I was just...
Great promo, Ryan. I almost fell asleep during it. Thanks, John. That's
the
perfect.
Music was so soothing.
The sponsor will love to hear that.
I was thinking of the mountains. I was thinking of that glacier water. I was thinking of what it'd be like to elope and just have the wind blowing in your hair lightly at this time of year in the spring.
Do you remember?
Start of the summer, and I got lost in my Jasper memory on my own right there.
Nice save. You remember back in the day, it sort of struck me, it always seemed to me that elopement was seen as kind of like a controversial...
Oh, it's the thing.
It was like a controversial thing. Everyone's like, oh, they eloped. Like they cut everybody out of the fun.
Weddings
they cut
are
everybody out of
stress.
the... Now it's like, why would you... I mean... I don't mean this for people. If you're planning your dream wedding and you've got 200 people, I'm so excited for you. And your parents have agreed to give you the $200,000 that it costs to get married these days. Maybe I'm exaggerating a tiny little bit.
Didn't you kind of elope? You kind of
not
had
really
like a destination.
No, we had a beautiful destination, but it
Yeah.
wasn't really we're not even close to an elopement.
Okay.
But I have friends that have. And you guys, you've shared your beautiful and special and very meaningful wedding story before. Although you guys stayed local, it was kind of an elopement.
Yeah, but then we
honor
went
your
to
wife. Yeah,
we went to Veradales after
100%.
and it's just.
But I think more and more people, I think eloping now, like this, that's why I think this business model is brilliant at jasperparkelopements.ca because like more and more people are looking at this and saying, why would I deal with the hassle of like my drunk uncle who's going to be there and like fall on a table like Tommy Boy style? Why am I going to bring my aunt who's going to stir things up and pick a fight, whatever? And why are we going to spend $75,000?
Well, just like both of us, we're both not from Edmonton, right? But there's a lot more people who have moved here, right? And so having a wedding, you got to bring in the aunts and uncles from Toronto or BC or wherever and bring them all together. And it's a big undertaking. It's a lot easier to just go somewhere, have an elopement, and then everyone's Zooming their ceremonies now. And
I love
grandma and whoever who can't travel are just getting in the chat and they get to see it all live. It's much easier. It saves the family some money. And then, you see them at Christmas and you give them a hug or whatever, right?
Yeah, totally. And plus for a lot of people, and I think if you are going to elope, I mean, I recognize we're sort of turning this into a longer ad for them, but also like, after that, I'm just kidding.
Fiasco. No. but you know what I mean? Like,
but seriously, like imagine like, and Jasper, like how many vistas do you have where you could go? I mean, right. Yeah. And they're going to pick you all the best spots. But like, if you just want to be with like just the two of you, or like six,
or your wedding party,
6 of your best friends, your wedding party, whatever. Like, how cool is that?
Weddings are getting very, 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 very expensive, and I don't want to say that again because I feel like I work with so many vendors, right? And they're all incredible and they're worth the money. But it's just the cost of everything they're doing is increasing, so they have to charge a bit more, right? And it's
especially I've heard that wedding DJs are really now charging the amount that wedding DJs are charging now is just preposterous.
I'm taking less weddings altogether. I'm taking the ones that I connect with the couple a little bit more. I'm taking the ones that I want to do because man, just doing so many, it's a lot of the, and I don't mean this against people here in Alberta, but the schedule, it's kind of the same, but bouquet toss, Beyonce single ladies. All right, let's do the Cadillac Ranch, last call, Sweet Caroline, go home. It's a lot of the same thing over and over.
Yeah. And for the record, I've told you time and time again, I have lectured you time and time again on how you don't charge enough for your gigs.
But go to Jasper.
Once I start managing your business, you're doubling your prices and you're cutting your work in half. That's
do something
exactly
different.
How it's gonna
go to Jasper, elope, have some of your best friends there, have an incredible scenery behind you. That's way better.
Hey, John, we are going to get to some of the comments we got out of Calgary in just a little bit. But first, if you can please share my screen. Johnny Infamous is DJing last night at the Moss Pit.
Oh, that's
it's going to go to the next one. I'm just running it through here for the benefit of those on the podcast. Here is your hero, Johnny Infamous, presiding over a party of how many thousand people at the Moss Pit.
Next one.
What was last night?
Here it
like
is, right
for
here.
You,
this is
dude?
when McDavid scores the empty netter, and now just look at this crowd for the people on the
mixer. Pod. This is bonkers.
It's just. The energy was absolutely insane. I had goosebumps. I'm so grateful to be there every day. And every time the Oilers get another win, I just keep thinking, this is how champions become champions. The road is never easy. Like the Florida Panthers, everyone thought they were just going to sweep. That's not how you make champions. I mean, this is what it's like. Like Connor McDavid is blowing my mind right now. He's in video game mode.
He's gonna beat. No, I shouldn't say this out loud.
Do it.
He's already beat Wayne Gretzky's. Everybody knows this already. Everybody that cares about what we're talking about already knows this. But he has beat Wayne Gretzky's assist record. Wayne Gretzky's assist record in the postseason already. Evan Bouchard is like top 3 now all time for defenseman performances in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Connor McDavid could set the all-time record. I want to not go on the record because I already am on the record and remind people that on this show, I called Oilers in 7, which means that we knew that the Panthers were going to win 3 of them. Now, that doesn't mean that we were hoping the Panthers would win the first 3 in a row, but this is still doable. And I saw somebody yesterday tweet one word, and we knew exactly. I think it's a Ted Lasso reference, but whatever it is, they just said, believe.
It's everywhere right now. And Connor also got 8 points in the last 2 games. I think he's third for most points in a Stanley Cup Final already. So, I mean, and we've got 2 games left. If we're lucky, I won't say that again. I'll say believe instead. But last night, this just almost like that New York goal that everyone puts up where he gets through the 5 of them. Again, another 4. And just the tweets coming in on X were just absolutely insane. People being like, there's no stopping Connor McDavid. Once he gets into video game mode, he's just absolutely incredible. But not only that, now the story's flipping to the guy we were all like blaming before. Stuart Skinner is just like dialed in. I mean, Ekholm is just dialed in. Nurse scored yesterday, and people were like, saying shoot him into the sun the game before.
The just scored game 4.
It's everything's going crazy. But shout out, and I will say
and how about Connor Brown, too, who didn't score for like months and months and months, right?
Give him all the money.
Wow. Well. Pump the brakes.
But I do want to say we're seeing some of the best hockey here, and Stanley Cup Finals are meant for that. But Tkachuk last night, I don't like Tkachuk, but look at this gameplay, man. He tried to save this, and Connor still buried it, but diving and getting the puck out of the net, he was by far the best player on the Panthers team on the ice last night, and that's because he made this big Mark Messier statement saying they were gonna close it all down that night. And what happens? We come back and drag them back down.
I love it. Drag them back to Edmonton.
But absolute bedlam. It's going to be Friday here in Ice District. It's going to be insane.
I'm looking at prices as we speak. I'm referencing an app that I use, but they don't pay us, so I'm not telling you which one. But I'm just looking at prices right now for the Game 6 in Edmonton, which is Friday the 21st. I think we can do this, man. I don't think I can do this. Like, if you want to sit in the lower deck, like, what's the cheapest? Oh, there's one you can sit behind the net for $1,900 US per seat. Yeah. So what's that Canadian? That's like 5 Gs for 2 tickets to sit behind this. The cheapest ticket in the whole barn right now is $1,392 a seat US in the upper deck. So $1,400 US is the cheapest. Now, you can find other sources. There's secondary markets. I love some people here. One guy's got his tickets posted in the upper deck for $9,000 a piece. I mean, dream big, buddy. Dream big.
We've seen the boxes for like close to 75 $100,000. Like,
yeah. And how about the Chicklets boys having a good time?
And they're on their way back.
They are.
I just talked to Biz and RA
I don't know
this
if my
morning.
liver can handle it.
They're on their way back. But what an incredible game. I was in an Uber this morning, and the Uber driver said, I drove me and my 10 other buddies drove about 100 people back to the airport after the game, all Florida people, right? Who were here, who thought, Stanley Cup Final sweep. And he said they were so pissed, and they were talking about how flights, the seats, friends and family of the team, but also people just from Florida who wanted to be part of this. And they're like, oh my gosh.
Although the exchange works favorably for them in the other way. But like you guarantee, I mean, of course, I think a lot of people are already looking at Game 7 right now for prices on tickets. And it's about $800 US, they were saying, for tickets to get into Game 7.
But just you and say it's you and your spouse, 2 tickets, hotel, flights for 2.
It's lots.
Booze, dinner, all the stuff when you come here, and then to just go back home in an Uber after the game and take a flight home with a sad face.
Oh, hey, this is one of the all-time comments in the Real Talk live chat. By the way, if you own a business and you're in charge of marketing, we're looking to sell sponsorship to the Real Talk live chat. Can you imagine how many times your business or organization's name would be mentioned on one of Canada's most downloaded daily news talk shows if you were to reach out to media at Ryan Jesperson and sponsor the Real Talk YouTube live chat?
Ding, ding, ding.
Shout out to Ms. B, who says Matthew Tkachuk putting his diving skills to good use. That's a great comment. I love that.
He was out there carrying the team, though, last night.
He sure was. Well, he hadn't scored in a long time. He wanted to win it in front of his dad. The Tkachuk family does not have a Stanley Cup, as we know. Tony, I love this from Tony, says the Panthers GM Bill Zito looked ready to have a stroke last night. That water bottle, the water bottle never stood a heat. Boy, oh boy, did he throw that water bottle.
Because he knows, too, every win that the Oilers pull off is it's more of a massive screw up in the head for these Panthers players. They never thought that they would not get a sweep. They thought it was going to be over. Then they get blown out 8-1. They're like, that was just a one-off. Now, like another shorthanded goal last night.
Right.
It feels like they figured out Bobrovsky. It's like every time the Oilers get an inch closer, they are just like in their head, they're thinking Connor McDavid is an animal. We're watching history go down. We are the villains more and more every game. Before it was like everyone was talking about how amazing this team was and it's going to happen this year. They were there last year and now everyone's talking about Connor.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about the Oilers flipping the script and how historic this will be to come back and win it. I'm ready.
I love this. We heard from Jake Kubisky. You've heard him on the show before, the CEO of Cuba Energy, and he just texted me last night. He said the best players need to be their best, and Connor is doing just that. MVP. Talk on the broadcast last night. Could Connor McDavid be the first skate? Like, listen, the Oilers are going to win the Cup. We already know that. They're winning in 7. But even if they didn't, I think Reggie Leach it was that in the 70s was the last for the Flyers to win the Conn Smythe as a skater on the losing team. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we know Jean-Sébastien Giguère did it as attendee for the Anaheim Ducks. But yeah, interesting stuff. And this is an interesting comment from Sylvia in the chat who says, and sort of tell me again how much people are suffering. Really, $1,300 for tickets. Sylvia, I'll take your point. Now, keep in mind, you only need to find 18,400 people in the whole entire world that can afford those ticket prices, and they're all here and they're filling the barn. But you're absolutely right. Like, isn't it interesting? And this is not, let me be clear, you got to be careful when you're talking about people's finances, because there's people that are busting their asses, single parents working 3 jobs, like a lot of people working around the clock, stretching dollars, pouring water into your milk to make it last longer, skipping meals so your kids can have, like, we get it. I get it. But I am just saying, isn't it interesting that when all we're hearing about is how interest is out of control, cost of living is out of control, people can barely afford this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then something emotional strikes, like a playoff run, like your favorite team. And all of a sudden, it's like people are buying the new jerseys, the hotels are packed, the restaurants are packed, the games are sold out. Yeah. I mean, it is wild to see what people, and I'm not taking away from those that have no chance. That's why I love what you're doing in the Moss Pit. People get that game experience. I love that they have the watch parties. People are able to do that. People get into the barn when otherwise they would never be able to take their kids to Rogers Place. And I appreciate that they have that opportunity. But Sylvia's right. There is that dichotomy. It is interesting to see how people can find the money when something emotional stirs them.
It's crazy. So I'm assuming, but I don't know. I think I saw a single mom on the elevator going down to the parking lot last night, and she was like, "This is my son's first Oil game." He looked like 7, 8 years old, and she's like, "Yeah, we can't afford the regular games, so we came to the watch party." But in her hand was a bag full of merch. Like I could see like jerseys, shirts, like it was a full bag of merch. And I thought, okay, but you still spent like hundreds of dollars
Probably
on merch coming
$1,000
here.
Yeah.
So you're right. People are like, I don't have the money, but I think right now people they want to be part of this, no matter how much it hurts the wallet. If they can get down there, if they can go to a watch party for $20, if they can get in the Moss Pit early, wait in line for free, even just to stand there and drink water, people just want to be a part of this.
Totally. I love this from Josh Human in the live chat, just in all caps, just says, "I am so ready." And then he gives the classic Ric Flair, woo! I just tweeted the Ric Flair woo last night. I didn't even have words with it because that was all I was feeling was just the Ric Flair woo.
You sent me a big LFG when it was like the third goal because I was like, I was scared too. And then by the third goal, I was like, like I keep looking at my counterpart, DJ Alizé. I keep looking at the managers out on the balcony at Rogers Place, and we just keep saying to each other, like, can you believe this is happening?
Yes.
Like, honestly, I don't want to say we didn't believe, but when you're down 3
we
rip,
believed.
I mean, the odds are against you. And now it's like, how much of a mind fuck this must be for the Panthers. They must be running scared right now. We have to go back to Alberta on a 7-hour flight and walk into that barn loud as that and play them again. The only bad part of this is if we do win, we're going to have to raise the cup in Florida, which is
whatever. Who cares, man? Who cares? Josh follows up, by the way, says people are pulling from their savings for a YOLO time, for a you only live once time, and he's right. Like, this could be a once in a lifetime opportunity, or maybe we'll do 4 in a row. Gilles says for some families the Stanley Cup Final is going to be their summer vacation. 100% correct. M. Aitken says this is kind of like Christmas. You just pay the credit cards off later, which is true. Or if you're like me in 2004, having just graduated from St. Polytechnic, unemployed, You just rack up a credit card from 0 to 10,000 and pay it off over like 5 years for the Flames Cup run.
What's with all this credit card debt? The Oilers won the Stanley Cup.
There was a Stanley Cup run. You might have heard about it.
There was a parade. There was everything.
Kimberly says, I have a hard time believing in all that affordability. Poor me. You know, the bars and restaurants are full. Concerts are selling out. And Kimberly, that's the thing. That's why I want to be careful, right? Because, you know, somebody will write in and like we get them every time. Like we got some real fuck you Jesperson emails about the Royal Canadian Navy. We'll get to them tomorrow in the Flamethrower presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. But like, I want to be very clear. I'm not taking away from families that are legitimately experiencing major financial struggles. But you're right. Like the bars and restaurants are full, and I'm thrilled that they are. And then you look at concert tickets these days. Like, I mean, we got tickets to Bruce Springsteen, and like it's like normal now. I mean, it's not normal, but it's like normal now that concert tickets are like $400. Like, what the hell, man? Do you remember when concert tickets jumped up to like 80?
Yeah.
And we thought that was a lot? Yeah. You know, concert tickets I mean, I know I sound like I'm 95 years old right now, but concert tickets used to be like $50.
Yeah, 60, 70, 80. Now, you know, if you're going to a concert, you and a friend, it's a $500 night at least because you got 2 tickets.
Yeah.
And then you're going to buy some extremely overpriced drinks at the event, maybe dinner before or a bite after, Uber there and back. It adds up.
Yeah. Gilles says, what, there's no show Friday? There is no show Friday, Gilles, because we do have the Real Talk Golf Classic going this Thursday, the 20th. There will be a show Thursday morning. I can let you know my dear friend Kathleen McGee, one of the funniest people I know. She's a Canadian comedian. She's incredible. She's fighting cancer. She's fighting like hell right now. And she's got her June Dresses campaign underway where she wears a different dress every single day. She posts a photo of it and she uses it as a fundraiser, but she will have you ROFLing. Look at me. Hey, I'm just so hip with the kids. But she'll have you rolling, laughing tomorrow. I guarantee it. And Kathleen and I have done TV and radio for many, many years together, and I'm really excited about Thursday's episode with her. Then Johnny and I head out to the Ranch Golf and Country Club for the Real Talk Golf Classic. You've heard me talk lots about it, Real Talkers, and we'll recap it after. So I won't rub it in for those of you that are not going to be there.
What a weekend.
We have 152 golfers showing up. Our sponsorship is sold out. We have 3 $100,000 holes in one, plus our friends at Sherwood and St. Albert Dodge are bringing $100,000 turbocharged Dodge Charger to park on a par 3. You can win that as well. So call that 4 shots at $100,000. We've got amazing hospitality partners like Fuge Sausage and Hayloft Steak and Fish and others.
After.
Soho Pizza, steak dinner to follow. All of it in support of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. And one of the really cool things about it as well is that we've got some of these scholarship recipients like you OG Real Talkers, like Randy Thunderhorse. I see you in the chat talking about episode number 1, and all those of you that have been here from the beginning. You remember when Julie Rohr was still with us. You remember when she used to come on the show and talk to us and give us her political takes and talk to us about fighting cancer and talk to us about being a mom, and I know she like burned herself into so many of your hearts, right? And then we remember her passing and how tough that was. And then, you know, we established that scholarship in her honor before she passed. She knew about it. She was part of it. And then now to look at how we've raised the funds. The scholarship fund is now over $100,000. There's currently 3 students, post-secondary students in Canada that are receiving funding support of $5,000 annually for this. And you're going to hear from those scholarship recipients at the steak dinner. How cool is that? It's not an idea now. It's a reality. And Julie's legacy continues. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But there is an after party, and that means that out of respect for this show,
it's a whole day.
We can't show up Friday. It just wouldn't be right.
But those of you who know Ryan know that Ryan he's an energizer buddy, and I consider myself
look at you,
very energetic too. But after this day, man, we do the show, we go to the course, we hang out with the people all day. There's a dinner, and then afterwards there's an after party. I'm gonna try and make it this year though, Brian. I know I didn't make it last year
to the after party. Well, it's a long day, dude. I mean, it's almost a 24-hour day.
Yeah.
Like you and I are in here for 7:30, and we leave here like at 7:30.
And then Friday is just going to be the whole city's going to be crazy. So this is a big weekend ahead. I can't wait.
100%. I don't know what Kenzie's talking about. Says our golf classic is an event for rich people. What are you talking about?
What?
Sharon, I'm ignoring it. She's trying to get under my skin. Sharon says if reminding us that Friday is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and she says make sure that you attend a community event. 100%, Sharon, and thanks for the heads up. If you want to hear more about some really neat things that are happening, partnerships with researchers at Athabasca University and Indigenous tradition, protecting in particular traditional food and water sources. There was kind of, it's like the intersection of industry and Indigenous tradition, and that was the focus of our June 18th episode yesterday. We talked to a couple of researchers from Athabasca University. We encourage you to check that out. Before we go, we talked about Calgary's water crisis, and I want to get to some of the comments from Real Talkers down in Cowtown, talking to us about what they're seeing. As you know, they basically asked for voluntary water, what's the word I'm looking for? Not like preservation, like conservation. Like they've asked people to dial it back, shower once or twice a week, don't do your laundry, don't flush your toilets as much as you need to, which is, if you think about it, I mean.
But are these comments disagreeing with
I'm going to get to them. No, they're not. I mean, some people, anyway, but first, before we do, let me just remind you that June is Alberta Pork Month, and our friends at Friesen Brothers are celebrating this wholeheartedly. I mean, obviously Friesen Brothers, for coming up on, a major anniversary. They're just a short ways away from their 70th anniversary, and they've always supported Alberta producers. It's Alberta pork all month long at all 17 locations. They sell only fresh Alberta pork, carefully crafted by their butchers. They got the perfect cuts for your grilling adventures this barbecue season. You can check out their website, friesen.com. That's FRESON.com for more, including recipes and details on how you could win a Napoleon grill. They're giving one away at each of their 17 locations. You got to be enrolled in their Smart Shopper program, and every time you purchase Alberta pork, you receive an automatic entry. I love the automatic entries. I can't stand the filling out the forms. Friesen Brothers has you covered all month long, celebrating Alberta pork. And our friends at Cuba Renewable Energy, speaking of Jake and his team, this is the time of year. I mean, their crews are pedal to the metal right now, installing solar on homes, businesses, farms, cottages, you name it. Their website shows that incredible installation they did on the Edmonton Convention Center, and Johnny's showing our YouTube viewers right now some of the cleanest installations you've ever seen. I love these drone images, so very cool. If this is something you'd like to be a part of, if you're looking to join a dynamic team, whether you're an installer, an electrician, an apprentice, a salesperson, you work in HR, Kubi's always hiring because they're Canada's fastest growing solar installer. You can check out the careers link online at kubienergy.ca. So we're talking about this water crisis, this water main breakdown in Calgary yesterday, and it was, we had heard from some people saying that they're watching their neighbors fill their hot tubs, and people are sort of saying, not everybody's complying in the neighborhood, and we got a couple of messages from people that were pissed off, and I'm not going to name them because I don't think that I'm not trying to pick a fight with them either, but people were basically like, do your research, you have no idea what you're talking about. Everybody in Calgary, we're proud of Calgary, which you should be. I'm born and raised there, but we're proud of Calgary and everybody's on board, and Real Talk doesn't know what the hell it's talking about. People watering their lawns, people watering their gardens, and I'm going, well, we're getting emails suggesting otherwise, right? So I threw it out there on Twitter. If you follow me at Ryan Jesperson, you can follow the show at Real Talk RJ, and I just basically asked Calgarians what they were seeing. And it was pretty interesting to see. Now, we're not trying to pit people against each other, and we're not encouraging people to, rat out their neighbors, so to speak. But as the city is basically bracing for Calgary Stampede, which I would guarantee is the most water that city uses in a 10-day stretch ever, all year round. It's pretty interesting to see what people are reporting. And I thought this was interesting from Paula, who said, I'm not from Calgary, but it does remind me of COVID restrictions, said Paula. There's the people that will go the extra mile to do what's right, and then the others that say, I'm going to do what I want. And she says maybe it's always been that way, but we're hearing about it more now because of social media. Dr. Lenora Saxinger, who you've heard her on the show many times, an expert in infectious diseases, said she says future disasters of any kind seem more dangerous now if there's a group that simply won't act for the public good. And she says, and I'm sure that this kind of story might make anybody thinking of going to Calgary think twice. I don't know. I think maybe people just bring their own water if they're heading down to Calgary. I had a buddy that brought a hockey bag full of water bottles down to Puerto Vallarta in his check bag. No, dude. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. I was with him. We were heading down. We were in university at the time, to be fair to him. But he shows up with a huge hockey bag in addition to his roller suitcase. And we were like, what are you doing? And he's like checking it. He's got to pay extra for the extra bag. I say, what's in there? He's like, bottled water. I was like, do you know that Mexico has bottled water, buddy? So Leader Cola tweets at us and said, my yard is littered. We asked people, what are you doing? Leader Cola says, my yard is littered with old plastic moving bins to collect water. We're wearing clothing that were in the donated bag. In other words, they're not doing their laundry. Leader Cola says, 3 of my garden beds are dead. That sucks. Our bathrooms all smell like pee due to flushing just once a day. And my neighbor filled up their hot tub yesterday. That from Leader Cola, firsthand down in Calgary. How about this one from Micro Painter from Lita, who says we're saving gray water from showers and sinks to flush our toilets. That's a great idea. Says we're having Navy showers every 3 days. I don't know what that means. What's that? Cold water? And collecting rainwater for the garden while the next door neighbor is watering the city-owned verge in front of his house with his sprinkler. How about that? I mean, that takes real stones to run your sprinkler while you're like amid something like this. I mean, that's really, I don't know. Alberta Educator says if COVID taught us anything, it's that a significant portion of Albertans will not limit personal comfort, even a tiny bit, to further the common good. Says if this system isn't completely fixed by the Calgary Stampede, it's going to 100% be a total shit show.
Oh, yeah.
Angie writes in and says, I do have a couple of neighbors that have been watering their decorative flowers in their lawn with the hose, not collected water. It says, but of course I have no idea what's going on inside. These are the same tinfoil hat types that likely believe this whole thing is a conspiracy and they don't trust the government.
I was just going to say this. Are these, just because some of the tweets you're reading, are these kind of the same people who would be like, it's my freedom to use the water on my lawn, even though there's a shortage.
Well, I mean, and then there's people that believe, like,
right.
Have you seen this conspiracy online that as they're sending this big piece of pipe up from the States, a lot of people are saying, well, that same pipe was available in Nisku, that same pipe was available in Alberta. Why didn't they get it from Alberta? So, like, I don't know if that's true. I suspect that that's not the case unless you've got an absolutely obtuse individual in charge of piping procurement.
Sure.
But I don't know. Hoping for a better Alberta is a nice handle on Twitter. Says once the Stampede hits, I'm predicting that the gloves are going to come off. It's hard to let our veggie gardens die, for sure. But once tourists and the tourism industry goes full throttle, like people were good until the announcement that the Stampede would continue. Says, I'm not happy, but people would do what had to be done. But people making all the sacrifices for tourists aren't going to be happy, which is interesting. Like if that water restriction is still in place and the Stampede is going pedal to the metal, you then wonder if everybody just goes, well, then I'm not.
How does that even happen?
Right?
I'm a little scared of what's coming ahead, but I'm sure the mayor is going to get back on the news in the coming days and give us an update. But apparently, and I was reading yesterday because I didn't see it until you mentioned it on the show, but everything's a go. Like all the stories say, hey, the Stampede is happening.
You know what we'll do? We're doing this on the fly here,
Regardless.
So you got to be careful when you say we're going to reach out to somebody and we'll book them on the show because you don't know their availability. But what we will do is we'll reach out to the Calgary Mayor's office. We'll see if we can book her worship, Jody Gondek, on the show next week at some point and ask her about this because I am curious to know if that pipe procurement story is true. I have a very hard time imagining that that's true.
That there's a pipe just sitting in Alberta.
Well,
that
there's
could have
like
been sent.
A pipe in Nisku and they're shipping one up from the States because they couldn't figure that out. Like somebody.
It sounds like we need it now. Let's get it from the fastest.
Fastest place we can get it from. But we'll see. And then just ahead of Stampede, it'd be interesting to talk to the mayor anyway. Like nobody's busier. Well, that's not necessarily true. Beer tub girls are the busiest, but the second busiest during Stampede is probably the mayor of Calgary. And then we'll put this out to you, Real Talkers, if you have firsthand experience. Like this is what we want to hear from, right? Like when I was joking about the Royal Canadian Navy ship that we sent down there, joking about that HMCS Margaret Brooke, who did we hear from right after that? We heard from a Navy veteran who had served on 2 different ships, 2 different vessels. Like, that's someone with personal experience. When we talk about, we're hearing stories in Calgary of people whose neighbors are filling up their hot tubs. These are real talkers that are sending us photos. We're not showing the photo on because it's going to identify the person that sent us the email who asked that we not send the photo. They're not looking to have a fist fight over the fence with their neighbor, but we're seeing it firsthand. You help keep this show best informed, and we appreciate you for that. Please tell your friends about this show as we wrap. Reminder that when you hit like on an episode, for us, it's a small step for you, but it's a big step for Real Talk Ryan Jesperson. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube. Thanks for subscribing on the podcast. Coming up on Thursday's episode, we're going to welcome one of my favorite comedians to the studio. Kathleen McGee's going to join us. It's going to be a fun morning. We're going to talk about some serious stuff as well. It's been a tough week for me personally. I haven't shared, but we've lost someone dear to us who's been fighting cancer, and Kathleen's agreed to hang out with me, and we're going to talk about real life. We're going to talk about her June Dresses campaign. We're going to talk about how in the hell she's still touring the country despite the fact she's being treated with her own battle. I guarantee you'll be inspired. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.